So I want to go back to Asmao now. You mentioned some very interesting things, like I said earlier, and I want to just kind of go like just give us a little bit of expansion on that. So you talked about the embedded systems. So there's someone that I know, very good engineer. Unfortunately, I feel like he's been very underutilized in Nigeria. Very intelligent,
Yeah.
and you're interested in embedded systems. So please, if you can expand on, just take us towards like a good illustration for an embedded system is, and what are some of the use cases for it.
Every day we use a lot of use cases for embedded systems. A lot of the devices we use are embedded with a lot of technologies that utilize these kinds of technologies. Let me use the example of Arduino. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this little tiny microchips called Arduino. Arduino
No.
and okay, they are like little controllers that you can use to program hardware. Yeah. So maybe you have. I had a friend who actually had this idea whereby he wanted to build a device that would prevent mosquitoes, yeah, from living in a place or maybe get rid of mosquitoes. So basically, you can program Arduino chip, put it inside the hardware that you build, and program it to do whatever you want it to do. So embedded system is actually very broad, I would say. It's not a one-way street. It's just the communication between the hardware and the software. Yeah. So
So
like our computers, yeah, they are filled with embedded systems. It's the hardware, which is the work that the computer engineers do, and then there's the software engineers that program the hardware to actually do what you want it to do.
okay.
So my
So
interest with embedded systems, yeah, is because I mean, software is very closed, yeah, but then I use a lot of hardware every day, and then I'm curious, okay, how does this work? I want to also be part of that as well.
so when you say this, like it kind of reminds me of IO. So how would you differentiate between IO and embedded system?
Are you talking about Internet of Things? IO?
Yeah,
What's
like
IO?
like the input output, like in terms of like computer, like
Oh, I mean, input output, we're back to electronics now. Input output and embedded systems, they all have to work together, yeah, because you have to put in, and it's I think that's the first or second law of physics. Something has to be put in motion for it to change its energy state. It goes from one state, right, potential energy, to kinetic energy, which is energy in motion. So input is basically giving it power, giving it energy to do something, and output is what you get at the end of it. Embedded systems is what happens in between the input and the output. So that's like in the middle. You get input, power in. Embedded systems, it does something. Something is programmed to do something, and there's an output. So it's all connected. You can't go one route without going through the other. It's a pipeline, I would say. Bowl of cereal, yeah. It's a lot of different things mixed together, but it's very nice at the end of the day. Gives some flavor.
it seems like it. So like in terms of AI now, let's talk from a Nigerian standpoint. Just what are some of the aspects in Nigeria that you feel AI can really improve, and just give us like an example, like where would you want to like kind of use AI? Um,
Agriculture.
okay, in what context?
Uh, Predictions. So there's something we found that actually because of the work I do at Co Amana, we're trying to find ways to actually make producers of goods produce things better. So we found out that the problem is not just about the gap between the buyer and the seller. The
Yeah,
seller also needs to be able to produce quality goods that the buyer would be interested in buying. And it's not just a one-time buying process. We want the buyer to keep coming back to buy. Then we decide to
yeah,
analyze, okay, what are the problems the seller is having? So the seller tends to have problem of production. And the problem of production
mm,
tends to be, let's say, seeds. They get the seeds, they plant the seeds, but they don't even have the knowledge to know what type of soil works with what kind of seed, what they can do to these kinds of seed to produce very good quality. And once they produce those goods, how do they store them? So there are a lot of technologies that would be able to give them accurate predictions. Let's say this season there's going to be a lot of rain. You shouldn't plant, let's say, certain crops that would be affected by too much water. So
yeah,
the farmer would be able to make that decision at that point and not invest his money in there, because at the end of the day, they invest so much money, they end up losing so much, they're not achieving what they want to achieve. The buyer cannot get what he wants to buy, so he has to import things from elsewhere. But a lot of using technology can bridge a lot of that gap. And with our product with CoAmana, actually, we're trying to do something like that. So we're in the process of developing a certain kind of mobile app that will be able to give you certain information based on certain criteria that you fill in. But we're really trying to find ways to make sure the producers of products and services are optimally producing these products and services in the best and most efficient way possible. And we can use technology to bridge that gap.
Okay.
Although our users tend to be low literate users, we're still trying to find innovative ways to actually engage them to keep using these applications.
That's good that you mentioned that. It's like you're from the future, because one of the questions I had to ask everyone is that in the context, like I have a few contexts. So in the context of agriculture is one of them, like how you can use your work to do that. And what you mentioned is very important, because it kind of we can use it to segue into the question I want to ask Iman, which is you do a lot of data analysis and all of those things, because you work with data sets and stuff like that. So how do you use Iman? How do you guys use data to have like to improve processes and to kind of improve workflow and to develop new systems that essentially are solving problems? And again, because you work in the health sector as well, there's a lot of privileged information and all those things. So how do you use data to inform processes, and then where do you draw the line at what is ethical and what is not?
When it comes to sort of, that's a really, really good question, right? So that's a very, very big challenge, specifically in the healthcare space, right? So like the way we use, what our company gathers is that they gather a lot of patient level information, right? So if you have a patient that's testing out a drug for ovarian cancer or whatever type of, whatever disease that they have, we're collecting this information on our software. So there's an entire team, a legal team that we work with that goes through the process of aggregating that, like not even aggregating, but there's a legal team that goes through the process of requesting data privacy rights. And then there's a statistical de-identification team that de-identifies the patients, but gives us the information for the patients. So there's a rigorous process, like an algorithmic process where we were able to do that. And then after that, then we have like, there's only certain things that we're allowed to do. So there's certain things that we can do with the data, which is operational. There's certain things that we can do, which is like get clinical data rights on. So there's an entire team that's set to just evaluate like whether we're allowed to use, what we're allowed to use. But in the healthcare space, it's very sensitive because you are not allowed to reveal even the pharmaceutical company that's developing the drug or the patient information at all, right? So that's just like, that boundary cannot be crossed, right? The way we use, I guess, AI in our case to sort of like she talks about developing predictions, right? So I can give you a project I worked with, which was like for Alzheimer's patients. What this company wanted to look at was they wanted to understand why were Alzheimer's patients dropping out of these clinical trials. And what we did was we gathered Alzheimer's patients' information from different other clinical trials. We brought it together, standardized it, obviously algorithmic de-identified everybody. Then we had our data scientists build out these models that were able to predict, give us factors as to why, right? So one thing we realized was like race was a factor, being African-American, being not maybe educated, if you were in an area where there are not that many people, if your caregiver was a friend and not maybe a spouse, those were little factors. So that helped that. And then there were other like clinical reasons as to why these people would drop out, right? If their minimum mental state exam was a little bit like on the further end. So what they were able to do was they were able to take this outcome, right? A lot of these clinicians, and they were able to now apply that to their trial as they were planning their own clinical trial, right? So maybe we should put more people in this facility to sort of support these number of patients, right? So where automation comes in, that I think becomes very powerful, right? Like I think when you're talking about agriculture, that's very true, right? It's just about intelligent decision making, right? And when you think of AI is not specific to like countries abroad. Like it's really just you being able to write code and write algorithms on large data sets, right? And then there's obviously natural language semantics. There's like other approaches, but like if you can, I think like if we can, I guess in Nigeria, that's what I would like to study is that if we have data, right? Like the things that we're not collecting information, right? But if we have this information, we can also just take a step back and just evaluate things a little bit better. It could be from again, like from just even understanding how road traffic works, right? Or we can even just be from understanding like how many patients are coming into a health center, which health centers probably perform a little bit better, right? So like a lot of this is just like intelligent decision making, and a lot of companies, industries, researchers are now stepping into those spaces to see how they can leverage. Because like the term now is like data is the new gold or is the new oil. If you think about it, I can apply it even in Siemens in that case, right? There's like, I'm sure there are teams that are doing sort of predictive modeling and they're helping you guys figure out, even in sales perspective, there's so many areas that we can use just technology to just be better and faster and more effective.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is data integrity and safety of data as well. And I
Yeah.
feel like just from my own point of view, in my opinion, we're getting there where we have a lot of capable people there in Nigeria, but I feel like um, in order for us to kind of really embrace the use of data and like developing like AI control systems, it will be very good for us to improve our security, system security, and all those things to ensure that data isn't being leaked too much. That's in the Nigerian context, but I
I
definitely
think we need regulation, right? I think because even if you steal people's information, who's catching you? Do you understand? I mean, like if you like, I think there needs to be maybe stronger regulation, right? Like companies like Facebook, if you think of how much negative press they're getting now because of just like
I mean, we have regulation, but for a lot of other things, but people still don't hear. I think
yes.
it's not just the regulation, but it's the enforcement of the regulation. And then just beyond the regulation, even if the regulation is there, unfortunately, if you've already stolen the data, you've already stolen it. Even if they catch you, you've already sold it probably, and it's already out there. So definitely there needs to be just kind of like better security in terms of that. But it's good that you mentioned it. So like for Munira, in terms of like Siemens, I know you work with the management aspect, but do you guys use AI also? And data gathering. How do you use your data to inform your service delivery? So how do you do that? What's the process?
So yeah, so it's more or less from the customer aspect of things, right? In terms of the management side of it. Engineering, it would be
Yeah.
data is being collected like based on what individual customers use, how they sort of operate those gas turbines, and how we can use that to incorporate the modifications and upgrades.
From what I'm understanding now, it seems to be kind of like B2B in terms of like it's your biggest clients are other businesses. So let's say I have a business or factory I want to run, then Siemens would be there to like provide me with power. Cool. Is that what you mean?
Customers are predominantly the oil and gas companies, so they mostly use those gas turbines for oil compression or extraction, right? Or they use them as like a backup generator on their oil rigs or platforms. Yeah, so it's predominantly other businesses as opposed to individuals.
These turbines that you provide, are
Yeah.
they closed or are they open source? If it's something you're allowed to talk about.
So they come back to us for the services and upgrades. So they owe it to us basically, right? So like I mentioned earlier on, it's more like our business is mostly, or rather we offer mostly those services as opposed to selling those gas turbines, right? So we have, specific customers that, have a fleet of those turbines, which, they need to come back to us in order to get them overhauled, which is, serviced, or if, there's any additional modification that, is available in order to improve the performance and maybe the life cycle of that turbine. So yeah, it always ties back to us, I would say.
This brings us to the end of the second episode of this community session, Women in STEM. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us in the next episode. Thank you.